So, welcome back to the Hubscale podcast, where we dive into the minds of security leaders all around the globe. Today, we've got a very special guest in Sylvia LePoidevin, CMO over at Kandji. And yeah, it's great to have you on.
Great to be here. Yeah, thanks, James.
Yeah, no problem at all. But no, I'm very excited for this episode. You've got a quite an incredible background and kind of a journey. So yeah, kind of keen to kind of dig in. But for the folks that don't know, yeah, it'd be good to understand what Conji do and where you're currently at.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm the CMO at Kandji. I've been here for a very long time. I was actually the fourth employee at Kandji back in the day when we began. This was over 6 years ago. And it's been a wild ride since then, as you can imagine. We're at almost 300 people now. We had our last valuation was 850 million. So it's been an incredible journey. In Kandji, we work with Apple devices. And so whether it's management, whether it's security, we have a whole suite of services around Apple devices. So we have device management, endpoint detection response, vulnerability management was our latest product that we actually released this year. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, we work with companies, every company you can imagine. And it's only becoming more popular at work to use Apple devices, whereas in the past that was not the case. And so that's
Yeah.
been a really fun wave to be able to ride as a company is that trend of, more and more people are like, non-negotiable, I need a Mac at work or I will not work here. And so that's something we've
Yeah.
seen a lot more recently. And it's been
Perfect.
really cool to yeah, work with modern innovative companies that use Apple.
Yeah, as someone who uses a MacBook at work as well, I can only kind of commend you on the work that you're doing. So no, it's good to have you on. But yeah, like I say, you've got been there for about 6 years. I think your journey's unlike many other CMOs in their time. But it'd be cool to kind of hear a bit more about yourself, how you came into tech. But before starting into that, talk to me. How has the kind of last 6 years been, and what's kind of the main roles responsibilities now at Conji?
Yeah, so I mean, the job has changed completely in the last 6 years, as you can
Yeah.
imagine. So, in the very early days joining, it was really like being on every single sales call, writing every single piece of copy, doing every single part of the job. So, I wore all the hats, I did every job in marketing. And then,
Mm.
of course, built out a team over the years. And so, I've reinvented myself many times over on this journey because you have to keep being the right leader for the next chapter and the next chapter after that. So it's
Yeah.
really a journey of like self-awareness and learning who you need to be for the next chapter. And so today the job is really the team.
Mhm.
And that means the team that works for me. That means the team that works around me. Obviously, there's setting the vision, telling the story. But as you grow in leadership, as the company grows, it really becomes so much more about the team rather than execution and doing the work, and
Mhm.
really just investing and developing great people. So that's really the journey that I've been on the last 6 years. And it's, I've learned so much. I mean, the last 6 years has also been like some of the greatest macroeconomic turmoil that we've seen. Zero interest era, and then just the tumultuousness of the last couple of years, obviously now AI. So it feels like we've run many different companies throughout those years for that reason
Yeah.
as well. So yeah, you have to be agile and keep learning.
Yeah, exactly that. But no, it's cool. Obviously, yeah, obviously stepped in and like you mentioned there, conjugal on something ridiculous kind of growth for the last 6 years and being valued almost at 1 billion now. But how did the world of kind of tech come to you? Like what was the kind of way that you stepped in? How's the kind of upbringing been to now being a CMO at almost a 1 billion valuation company?
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy story. So I actually grew up in Africa almost my entire life. I was born in the
Mm.
US. We moved to Africa when I was 2 years old. My dad works for a nonprofit, and he's a pilot. So he basically goes to parts of the world where they have no transportation or the roads are terrible, or there's mountains or whatever. And so he has things like a flying doctor program and basically lands on little airstrips in the middle of nowhere. So I grew up
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere for that reason. And so I came to the US when I was 17, basically got dropped into LA with nothing, went to university there. And then I really fell into tech. I got recruited as a company to be their first marketing hire, and I was maybe
Yeah.
like 22 years old.
Wow.
and wildly unqualified for that job, by the way. But
Yeah.
it was a SaaS company, and I was so excited about it. I was like, "This is my shot to make it." And so I got the job, and that company is actually worth 1.6 billion now. They're
Jeez.
pre-IPO, they're killing it. So just got really like straight into tech, and that journey got supercharged very quickly.
Mm,
But yeah, it's so happy to be here. It's just I love the pace and the innovation and just the ability to build, and especially, being that first hire in the early days is just so fulfilling to see
yeah.
something be built from nothing.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And it's about how, so obviously going back to 17-year-old self, just coming into America again, how did that kind of impact you, or what was the kind of main learnings you had? Because we see a lot of people, especially in the UK, moving over to the US. Like, funnily enough, we just opened up an office from a guy from Stoke who's moving to Austin. But yeah, how was that for yourself? Obviously, living, born in Africa in the middle of nowhere to living in the big city.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly different on so many levels. I remember my first observation when I moved here, and this isn't like necessarily a positive observation, but
Mm,
my observation was that people don't say what they mean and they don't mean what they say. I was coming from a place where, you're often, a few families that are foreigners in the middle of a foreign country. And so you stick together and you help each other out. And it just, I really had to get used to just the way that people communicate. They're so reading between the lines. And I think this would be true to moving to any culture from any culture, right? You have to learn
yeah.
the language, and the language could still be English, but it's a different language. And so that was really the big thing to learn, was just the minor social cues and reading between the lines and trying to understand, people's intent when I was coming from a place where people were a lot more direct.
Yeah, makes sense. I appreciate as well, being such an early age, how that can kind of affect you. But no, it's really good to kind of see your resilience there, kind of jumping into a startup at 22 as well. Not many people kind of say that too. But yeah, tell us about the kind of the journey then. Obviously, like I say, you kind of fell into tech. Moved over to Kandji about 6 years ago, employee number four. How did that first came about? How did you kind of meet the founders, Adam and Mark?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually applied on LinkedIn. Didn't know the founders. People always ask me, like, you must have known them to start this
Mm,
early. I didn't. But it was funny. I had this whole like long checklist of things I wanted in my next role. And I was looking because my previous startup I was at was I moved to San Francisco at that point. I was working at the startup. They got acquired by Oracle.
yeah.
And Oracle, as you know, massive company, super slow.
Mm,
I did not want to, it was just not my speed. So that's why I was looking. And yeah, I just stumbled on Kandji literally on LinkedIn, if you can imagine that. But it was just an immediate connection with the founders, with their vision. They had clearly, like, they've come from this space, they've been in this space a long time. And so there
mhm.
was no doubt that they really understood what they were building and they understood the people they were building it for. And I think this is one of the most important things. That
Yeah.
first startup I was at 22 was similar, where the founder was coming from the exact space and he was solving an exact problem that he had, struggled with for a long time. And so I think
Mhm.
that, to me, at least in my experience, has been a really good mark of a company that can have some success, is if the founder is like coming from that space, really
Yeah.
understands it, has felt the pain. I think that's something that's hard to replicate.
Yeah, exactly that. No, couldn't agree more. But obviously, completely new product, completely new company, new team, employee number four. It's not really a lot going on in terms of processes and that type of thing. So, what were the kind of, when you first stepped into Conji, what were the main things as a marketing leader that you were looking out for? What was the kind of foundations you put in place?
Yeah, so I think step one was just being on every single sales call. And for anyone
Mm,
joining an early stage company, I highly recommend this, or joining any company really, because my biggest observation was, like, I was on all these calls, and we sell generally to IT and security leaders, right? So they're not necessarily the most expressive, like telling you how they're going to feel, but they would see these little moments and you would just see like the delight on their face. And that was like so solidifying for me that like, okay, I'm in the right place and there's clearly something here because I can see it on their face. And you
Yeah.
don't get that unless you're like on those calls. And then, yeah, it was like taking everything I learned from those calls and about the buyer and doing the basics, like building the website, writing every piece of copy. And I was able to do that because of that like deep connection with the buyer from being, on in every
Hmm.
conversation in the early days. And there's still things now that I lean on that I learned back then. So I think that's
Yeah.
incredibly valuable when you begin.
Yeah, makes sense. And then in terms of yourself, obviously, you really want to make sure you're selling to the right people, understanding the actual need there. What's the, as like, if you were to go back, what was the first thing to say, like, right, this is what Kandji needs now as a marketing point? Was it more demand gen, product marketing? Where are the first kind of elements that you really focused on?
Yeah, I mean, when you join any startup, there's always this pressure to hit the number next month, the month after,
Mm,
right? And so you have to do like demand gen has to be part of the focus in the early days, at least for most companies.
yeah.
There's also a heavy dose of product marketing because it's like we need to build a website. What is our story? What is our messaging? And the founders actually, when they hired me, they were having this debate internally: do we need product marketing or do we need growth? And I had actually had both in my career, which I'd done very intentionally because I wanted to be a CMO one day. And so I
Mm,
wanted to have the product marketing and the growth experience. And so I was able to do both because I had been very intentional about like really cultivating both of those skill sets. Because
yeah.
a lot of CMOs will come up through like a particular track, like they're like the growth CMO or they're the brand CMO or whatever. And
Yeah.
I really wanted to have a more well-rounded skill set. So I had gone after both of those. So yeah, I'd say it was certainly growth, putting numbers on the board, and then, product marketing, defining the message and the story. Those were the tasks in the early days.
Perfect. And then for any kind of other marketing leaders in a similar situation yourself, what would you say would be the most important piece for them? Like, what would be the kind of main lesson you might have learned that you might have not gone the right way as being like one of the, well, employee number four?
Yeah, I mean, if there's something I would have done differently in the very early days, it would have been having a clearer, bigger vision story. And
Yeah.
I would do this in the form of like a manifesto where it's like, what do we believe about the world? Where do we
Mm,
think this is going? Why do we exist? And then what will be different about the world because we existed versus if we didn't? How are people going to win in, the way that things are going? So if I were to do it again, I would write that really early on because I think that becomes like all of your marketing and all of your content should be pointing in a single direction. And I think that
mhm.
manifesto can help you define that direction. And a lot of those answers have to come from the founders.
Yeah.
They're not going to come from research. They're not even going to come from the buyer. They're going to come from like, what is our DNA? And
Yeah.
so that's something I would have gone deeper on in the early days. I think in the early days, we had a lot of just very practical messaging. And that actually worked really well because we're in a
Mm,
category where there's a real need. So we could literally just say, like, we manage Apple devices and we'd have people raising their hands, which is great. But I think it would have been even more powerful if we would have woven in like a stronger story in the early days and a
yeah.
direction and having an opinion on things.
Okay. Interesting. And then obviously coming in, kind of listening to those sales calls, really defining what Conji does, building a website. When did you really start to feel like, oh shit, things are starting to happen now, and the real kind of movement started?
Yeah, it really started with actually we announced our seed funding. And we
Mm,
did so I joined before that. We announced our seed funding. We got a piece in TechCrunch covering our seed funding.
yeah.
And we were flooded with demo requests that day of the announcement. Like we were like drowning. We were like, oh no, what are we going to do? We have our calendars are all booked up and people can't book calls and
Mm,
fantastic problem to have. And so that was really the moment where we were like, okay, there's something here. And it just took us getting that little spark of, that TechCrunch feature and that initial, there was clearly just so much like pent up demand in the market for this that they literally saw this TechCrunch article and reached out. So that was really the spark moment that it was really our coming out party. Like we'd really announced ourselves to the world at that point. And
yeah.
so I'd say it started very strong for that reason.
Yeah. And obviously, like you mentioned there, you started off in San Francisco. Now, did you open up a Miami office? So when did the things start to really change for you? When did you realize like you're not this scrappy early stage startup? Now you're getting to more of like a growth vendor. Where did that kind of point come in?
Yeah, I would say it was really around our Series B, which was 60 million. That was when
Mm,
we really started to scale hiring and headcount growth. And I think we hired an astronomical amount of people in just a few months period of time. And so that was the moment where, that kind of pivot to Series B, I think, where we really got into more of like, okay, this is a solid enterprise company. We have systems, we have
mm,
a large team. At that point, though, it was COVID, so we were hiring remote everywhere, as everyone was. And it was, yeah, just a wild time of just like scrambling to hire as quickly as possible. Um, and then having to put in, of course, a lot of systems in place as we did that to make sure that we were ready to like actually help those people be successful.
yeah. And a big thing as well, I think, obviously, I hear it pretty much every day is company culture. How would you kind of maintain that culture being in place when you're a team of four to now a team of 350?
Yeah, such a good question. I think a lot of people would probably say something like, oh, our values or something like that. When we were going through that scale phase, like honestly, we didn't even have written down values at that point.
Mm,
We do now. We do now. And they do help us like define that hiring process. But yeah, I think we have a very specific company culture. It's very people who are very passionate. There's a lot of people that come from the Apple management space that are deeply passionate and knowledgeable about it. That just kind
yeah.
of ripple effects to the rest of the company. So I'd say there's a lot of people who just really deeply care, who are passionate, and who want to help. And I think that comes from that like core DNA of actually the people we sell to. Like the Apple
Yeah.
management administrative community is still small, right, compared to like the PC world, for example. And so I think it's a community that just deeply wants to help each other, and I think that's kind of rubbed off on us as well. There's a
Hmm.
lot of passion, there's a lot of strong sense of community, and that's certainly, we've seen that internally as well. But it wasn't necessarily something we wrote down in the early days. It was just something that was kind of felt and known, and that I still feel to this day, which I think is rare.
Yeah. Well, especially if you've done it twice as well, being kind of the head of marketing at not one but two, almost 1 billion valuation companies is quite unique. But is there any areas that you've seen where people might have made mistakes as like a business or that you might have experienced yourself?
Oh, so many. A lot. You always make mistakes in the
Yeah.
early days, right? Whether it's a hire that wasn't the right hire, or a business strategy direction that you end up cutting off because you realize later on it wasn't right. I've seen a lot of those. There's even like product functionality, at multiple companies I've been at in the past where like we're building a whole piece of the product and then we end up not going to market with it because we realize, wait, this isn't quite right. We need to take a step back. We need to revisit. We need to change it. We need to make sure this is really going to land. So I think
Mm,
that ability to pivot and sort of cut your losses and change your mind, I think is really much more important than getting everything right to begin with, because you're not
yeah.
going to.
Yeah, makes sense. So in terms of when, kind of like you say there, when you're putting in the processes, building the teams out properly, I know you've got different people in different areas. Like say you've moved from San Francisco over to Miami. Going back to the kind of company culture piece, is how would you kind of make sure everyone's in it to win it, and but particularly in different areas? Like a few people could be in the UK, some people could be in the US. Is there any particular ways as a leader that you've seen that have proven quite fruitful for kind of more of a global team?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think, well, we do get together in person on a somewhat regular basis. It's not overly structured, but
Yeah.
we have always been intentional about creating that in-person time. And I do think that's important when you are able to look someone in the eye and, go to coffee with them. Then actually we just had someone from our London office here last week, and it was so incredible just to like sit down and have a coffee and connect for even just 20 minutes. And then it makes a world of difference when you're slacking them the following week. So I think
Hmm.
getting together in person is important. We actually used to we would get the leadership team in person, and we would all sit in this like giant round table, and we would literally just go around it wasn't even a table. It was just like a giant, like we'd congregate, in a circle, and it was just like everyone would go around and share what they were, just an update. What are they excited about? What's their challenge? What are they working on? And
Yeah.
that was really helpful. Just kind of some of that unstructured time and specifically in person, to really, really deeply connect. I think there's other things you can do kind of within individual teams to keep that connection
Yeah.
strong. But yeah, I think from a leadership perspective, it's giving people space to share updates, talk, and then ideally, have some time in person every now and then as well.
Yeah. I think having that face-to-face time is just groundbreaking, isn't it? Even us being on Zoom now, but yeah, hopefully one day we get to meet face to face. But kind of go back to Kandji then. Obviously, you guys have scaled rapidly over the last 6 years, in quite a competitive space as well. But obviously, if you look a bit deeper, the Apple device management is quite a focused niche. How did you kind of market it that, and how did you kind of see this scale out properly? Like, is there a way that you really found yourself as, yeah, these guys are going to be, or like which way to be in the successful ways and that type of thing?
Yeah, it's funny one in terms of like the competitive landscape and how we navigated that. Actually, one of our
Yeah.
values that we've now written down is that, but we've said it since the early days, even before we wrote it down, was that we run our own race. And I
Hmm.
think this is useful because obviously you need to be aware of the competitive environment and see how the chips are falling around you. But I think we've always done things a different way. And we've looked at like a problem we're trying to solve and what's the shortest distance to solving that problem versus like how can we just check the box about what the other competitors are doing. And so
Yeah.
I think we've always just had like a unique, there's like people will say this or like there's just something different about how you build your product, how interact with your people. And so I think it comes from this value of like we're gonna run our own race. Again, we're not gonna like be blind to what competitors are doing, but I think we've been very focused on doing things our own way
Yeah.
versus following the pack. And I think that's given us a lot of clarity.
Yeah, definitely. But is there any particular kind of campaigns or initiatives that you're especially proud of that you might feel like, yeah, this could be a real breakthrough?
Yeah, we have a lot of recent ones, and they're recent, so they're top of mind. I'm sure I
Yeah.
could dig back and think of some earlier ones as well, but um, our big focus right now is on brand community building, and so we've launched a couple of things. We have a podcast as well, actually called Patch Me If You Can, and but we were very intentional around this how we created the podcast, where we wanted to interview people who are patching what's broken
Hmm.
in any area around IT and security and sharing that specific story. And so it was less about, because we felt like the practitioner, the IT manager, the admin, the security manager, especially in the Apple space, there's just not a lot of resources for them. And so we wanted to really, really share something practical.
Yeah.
So that's been really, really powerful. Very, just allows us to connect with people, have them share stories and spotlight people from the community that are doing really cool things. And
Yeah.
so that's just the response we've gotten of people who've wanted to come on and speak and share their story. Like, again, this is part of the DNA of that community. They really want to help each other. And so we're trying to give them like a platform to do that. And that's been
Yeah.
very, very well received.
Perfect. Yeah, it's just like kind of standing out from the noise, isn't it? And doing something a bit different compared to what other people might not do.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of going back to the kind of leadership piece, also, I think that everyone will be quite interested in there. But is there any particular, trying to think of the way to rephrase it, but is there any particular piece of advice that you've received about potential leadership or confidence and how that's kind of guided you, or any areas that you could potentially share there?
Yeah, I know it's very different. Like I have some examples that are coming to mind from the early days of my career than some from later.
Yeah.
In the early days, it was really about, I had a lot of great mentors, and I would absolutely recommend this for anyone early in their career who's making a pivot or something.
Mm.
And I had a mentor specifically who I remember getting on this call with her, and I had started recently at this early stage startup, was super young, had no idea what I was doing. And I got on this call with her and walked her through everything that I was doing. And she just was like, yeah, you're doing the right things. And that was like all I needed to hear at that moment
Yeah.
was just like, keep going. You're doing the right things. Like you're on track. And hearing that from somebody who was so experienced and knew everything about, marketing leadership, that was really helpful. I'd say another
Yeah.
piece of advice I got later in my career um, was really around like to show up as a leader. And actually, the advice that comes to mind is that he gave me was like if you're not being fully authentic with your team, like they know, they
Mm.
can tell.
Yeah.
You can't be sneaky about it. Like you can't like put on a good face and be like, oh, I have to share some bad news, but I'm gonna pretend like it's good news. Like they can tell. Like don't even
Yeah.
try, And that was actually some of the best advice because it's true. It's like you can sometimes you do have to deliver bad news. Just let it be bad. Like don't try
Yeah.
to pretend like you're excited about it. Obviously, you can find some good threads in the silver lining and share that too. But if it's not coming from an authentic place, then they'll be able to tell, and you
Exactly.
might as well not even try.
Yeah. Don't try and sugarcoat it, as we'll say over the UK. But
Mhm.
yeah, obviously, then you guys are going to some pretty impressive growth, and I think what everyone's kind of thinking of is how marketing is technically going to change over the next 5 to 10 years with everyone's favorite topic, AI. But it'd be cool to understand how you may potentially implement it today. How do you see yourself kind of moving towards being more of like an AI company potentially, or how you see more leveraging AI in your team?
Yeah, I'm really excited about AI. It's funny, I was talking to one of our product leaders yesterday about we've been having obviously a lot of AI discussions, both for internal, for the product, et cetera. And it's
Mm,
crazy how many different opinions are out there. Like if you
yeah,
have 20 people in a room, you'll have 20 different opinions, and some people will be far on the side of like, it's taken all the jobs and like we got to get on board with it. And then the other side will be like, it's a bunch of fluff and it's just noise and we should just keep on. And so it's a very polarizing topic, I've realized. I would probably lean more on the side of yes, it is transformational. And, when I think back to like what we've learned from history with the dot-com era, for example, it's like, yes, it was a
hmm,
bubble that burst and there was this crash in that era, but everyone has a website now. And I think
yeah,
AI will be similar, where, yes, is there a lot of hype around it and a lot of noise? Absolutely. But I also think in the future, it's like going to be similar. Everyone has a website now. Everyone's going to have
yeah,
some form of AI that's core to how they do business. So we've done a few things internally that have been really fun around AI, where one thing we did early on was hackathons, where super unstructured. We would just get the whole marketing team in a room and we would pick a problem to solve and we would just split up into groups and we'd brainstorm and we'd build and we'd try to leave that session being like, okay, we built something that's usable.
yeah,
And that was really helpful early on because all of us knew bits and pieces about AI, but nobody was an expert. But it just, when we were able to put all of our heads together, you realize like the collective knowledge around it is stronger than you think.
mm,
And then
yeah,
the other benefit was just the ripple effects that it creates. Like the day after the hackathon, the day after that, I'd have people coming to me and being like, I have this other idea now of what I can do. And so it really helped create that like cultural change and helped get people excited about it. And then just have the satisfaction of like leaving the room knowing like, hey, we built something that's really good.
yeah.
That
I
was
just think
awesome.
people just need sorry, people just need to be more educated on it, don't they? But would you ever see a point, particularly in kind of a marketing team, that AI would replace people, or where would you kind of view your on that in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's so funny. There's so much. This is such a hot topic as well. I mean, I
Yeah,
I do think there is an element where a single person is going to be able to do a lot more. And does that translate to like it can replace some roles? Maybe you need one role instead of two. I absolutely think that might be the case. And I think a lot of people want to avoid that conversation. And I hear a lot of people say like it's not replacing jobs. It's just, making us all better. And I'm like, that's a nice
yeah,
thought. But at the end of the day, there is some reality to the fact that like, yeah, if you make people more productive, then maybe the team doesn't need to be as large. So
mm,
I think there is some truth to that. And I think the way I see the world going is I think marketing teams will end up sort of in two camps, marketing team members. You'll have like what I call the tastemakers, and then you'll have the operational minded folks. And so I think the tastemakers are like, because yes, AI is powerful, but you still have to train it on what's good, like what's
yeah,
quality, what's real. And so I think there's going to be this profile of people that are going to get really good at just giving feedback. This is good. This is good. Do more of this. The tastemakers of like what it should be producing. But then you obviously need this other hand of the ops side of it that's doing the technical work, and maybe you're, connecting different tools through APIs because that's going to be more important than ever. Or maybe it's just setting up workflows, inserting, agentic workflows into somewhere where maybe a human doesn't need to be inserted. So that's kind of the world and I already see people on my team. We've talked about this, and people definitely kind of gravitate to one or the other. Some people sure can probably do both, of course, but I think those are kind of like the roles post AI, however this evolves. I think they'll, be kind of segmented that way a bit.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Yeah, like I said, I think as long as people kind of educate themselves and know how to use it properly, then that only can be a good thing, in my opinion. But what should we expect? Obviously, like you say, I think you got Series D funding not too long ago. What's the kind of next roadmap for Kandji over the next 5 to 10 years as well?
Yeah, I think we have a lot on the horizon, a lot of growth. Yeah, our Series D was really a big expansion for us with launching vulnerability management and expanding those product features. So I think it's just a lot more growth. I think we're at this sort of tipping point of reaching a point where we're really well known in the community, and
Yeah.
we really want to like build more connections there. Obviously keep expanding and improving the product. We still get tons of feedback. There's so much to do. So I think it's really continuing to build the team, the product, all the classic things, the team, the product, but also just deepening that community that we've now built. I think there's a lot of exciting things to come there.
Perfect. Well, no, it's been great to have you on the podcast today. And I know, like I say, you've been there, been an incredible 6 years, and I'm excited to see what happens over the next more 6 years. But yeah, to kind of wrap up the podcast, it'd be great to understand, obviously, you're quite an interesting going back to a 17-year-old Sylvia, just moving to the US now. If you could kind of visit her again and give one piece of advice, what would that what one piece be?
That's an amazing question. Um, I think, when I was 17, moving to the US, I definitely I wanted to belong. Like I'd been an outsider my entire life. And I'll answer your question, but this is the backstory of it. I've been an outsider my whole life, right? I was a foreigner in Africa when I was younger, and then I was almost a foreigner in the US because I wasn't really from there either, and I had this crazy story. And so, I've just been like an outsider everywhere I've been in my life. And I think when I moved to the US, I tried really hard to belong and to fit in. So looking back, what I would say is that actually it's what made me so unique. That was such an incredible superpower. And to lean into that and not find the need to belong, but realize that my unique story is actually one of the most valuable and special things about me. And so just releasing some of the pressure to feel like, oh, I have to catch up on 17 years worth of pop culture, which I didn't. I still don't know pop culture, but yeah, it's just it's not necessary because it's what makes you different is really powerful.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that's the perfect way to end the podcast. But no, it's great having you on, Sylvia. It's been an absolutely fantastic conversation, and I'm sure everyone else will enjoy it too. But I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, James.
Perfect.